Picture this. You enter the gaming console market and, against all the odds, absolutely dominate. But your competitors all have their own mascots, cute little guys that go hand in hand with selling their console. And you have not a mascot. So what do? When creating the PlayStation 1, Sony was far more concerned with getting the hardware developed than they were with developing games. Sure, there was some in-house development, but most of the time, Sony took a look at what was being developed and went ahead and published some of the heavier hitters. And there was one guy that far and away became synonymous with the PlayStation: Crash Bandicoot. Sony published all of his games during the PS1 era and positioned him as their Mario, even having commercials where he was talking shit at the Nintendo headquarters. And when you have that popular and recognizable mascot, what do you do with him? Put him in a Mario Kart clone. Crash's developer Naughty Dog actually crafted a kart racer with the intention of it being an original property. After pitching it though, Sony agreed to publish the game only if it was developed into a Crash game, and Naughty Dog agreed, and so Crash Team Racing was born. Like other Mario Kart clones, CTR focuses on the wackiness that Mario Kart pioneered. Unusual tracks, wacky items, a load of characters, and multiplayer fun. Unlike other Mario Kart clones, CTR was in a unique scenario. Mario Kart wasn't on the PlayStation, so there was easily a gap to be filled. And believe me, people were trying to fill that gap. But Crash also had the star power to really move copies of the game. In the 90s, he was unbelievably popular, so making a kart racer through the Crash lens just worked. And the most important distinction from other Mario Kart clones? This game is actually f***ing good. It wasn't a quick and dirty cash grab, just throwing a character and a cart into a blender. They first and foremost wanted to make a good game. It's always a risk making one of these games because Mario Kart just sets the standard. If you're too much like Mario Kart, why bother playing the game when you can just play Mario Kart? But if you're too different, what the hell, why isn't this like Mario Kart? CTR toes this line perfectly. It's just similar enough to Mario Kart while deviating in ways that actually improve the experience, like the controls. This game feels way better to drive in than Mario Kart 64. That game feels a little too slippery, like one wrong move and you're flying away. In CTR, when I'm hopping, drifting, maneuvering through tight turns, I just feel like anytime I mess up, it's usually because it's my fault. Speaking of hopping and drifting, CTR implements different mechanics to these abilities that are tough to learn, but so satisfying to master. When hopping off a slope or ramp, the amount of time you hang in the air translates to a boost when you hit the ground. The more air time, the bigger your boost. This makes hilly areas not just an experience. If you can time your hops well, you end up zooming through these sections. Hopping on your own also sends you pretty high, and there are some sections where only a well-timed jump can get you to a shortcut. Drifting is about what you'd expect in the game, but the boost you can gain from a drift is another thing that's pretty technical. While drifting using one of the shoulder buttons, you need to time a press of the opposite shoulder button to gain a boost, pressing it either when the smoke behind you turns black or when your meter in the corner turns red, and you can do this up to 3 times off of a single drift. These driving mechanics have quite a learning curve to them when you're first starting out, but once you've built up the muscle memory and the skill and you sort of learn the tracks, they really open up your freedom. Hopping to a shortcut, chaining drift boosts together, it all makes for such a satisfying gameplay experience. Items work a bit differently than in Mario Kart 2. You've got the staples, the beaker is like a banana, the missile's like a red shell, and there's a shield, boost, and invincibility. But there are also a few unique ones. The bombs are sort of like green shells that loosely head towards other racers, but you can press the item button again to prematurely detonate it. Then there are the TNT crates, which when hit by a racer will begin a countdown. If you can hop enough before the timer hits 0, it'll remove the TNT from you, but otherwise... CTR also combines these items with their own version of coins, the Wumpa Fruit, to make a sort of upgrade system. Collecting Wumpa Fruit will increase your top speed, with 10 being the maximum. But when you're holding 10 Wumpa Fruit, all of your items are now upgraded into a better version. The beaker goes from green to red, and if a player is hit by it, they not only crash, but also become slower for a bit. The TNT crate becomes a Nitro crate, and none of that hopping nonsense applies. It just fully explodes on contact. I like that this mechanic gives a purpose to the Wumpa Fruit. Obviously they grant the buff to your speed, but that's something that's really hard to notice unless you're looking at a side-by-side comparison. The item upgrade thing though is a very noticeable effect, giving you a far more compelling reason to grab Wumpa Fruit in my opinion. But to me, CTR's big claim to fame has always been its adventure mode. Of all the kart racers of this era, the two that often stand out are Crash Team Racing and Diddy Kong Racing. both because of their excellent adventure modes. The developers of CTR actually took Diddy Kong Racing's Crescent Island track and recreated it in their engine to see how the PlayStation could handle a course of that size and scope and determine what their limitations could be by comparison. In the story, a big bad alien guy named Nitrous Oxide threatens the Earth and wants to defeat the fastest racer. So you go through a bunch of races, defeat some bosses, and then save the day. But even aside from directly using a Diddy Kong Racing track, it's clear that CTR's adventure mode was inspired by that game. There's a hub world you drive around to get to different tracks, and these track portals offer different types of matches. You have regular races, but there are also relic races and CTR coins to collect. To collect the relics, you need to complete a time trial in the fastest time possible, using time crates that will pause your time for a range of seconds. You can get sapphire, gold, or platinum relics depending on how quickly you do this. Collecting all of the platinum relics lets you take on Oxide again for an alternate ending. CTR tokens are collected by collecting the letters C, T, and R hidden around a racetrack and finishing first in the race. There are different colored tokens, and the exception to the rule is the purple tokens, which are done by collecting all of the crystals in the crystal bonus rounds. Collecting 4 of the same color token unlocks a gem cup, and winning the gem cup unlocks certain characters. Or you could just skip all of this and do like I did and enter a cheat code on the menu and get them all. It's kind of crazy that this was the first Crash kart racing game because it just nails almost everything. It's just that good. Even Nintendo needed a couple tries to really figure out everything for Mario Kart. But on the other hand, Naughty Dog did make CTR later, so they had more time to scope the competition and really see what worked and what didn't. The movement and drifting, the item play, the world and aesthetic and humor that Crash offers. Not to mention playing it on a way better controller than the N64, all of this comes together to make a fantastic game. And at the time, there were high hopes for the future of Crash as a gaming icon. And you can't forget my favorite mode, the Spyro 2 demo hidden behind a button combo. This video is sponsored by Factor. Are you like me and can never decide what to eat, so you end up making the world's saddest sandwich? Then Factor is here to save you with their fresh, never frozen meal kits. Factor just doubled their menu, meaning you have over 80 chef-crafted meals to choose from every week. There's always something for you to enjoy. And there's plenty of choices as well, like high protein, calorie smart, and gluten-free. It's so nice to be able to just grab a meal, throw it in the microwave for a few minutes, and dig in. I especially enjoyed their Tuscan pesto baked salmon, and for a nice snack, their strawberry banana smoothie. To get started with nutritious, easy meals, head on over to factor75.com or click the link below and use code Aaronitmar FB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a full year. That's code Aaronitmar FB50 at factor75.com for 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Moving into the PlayStation 2 generation, some legal nonsense took place that resulted in Crash no longer being exclusive to the Sony platform. Universal Interactive merged with Vivendi Games, and all home console games moving forward would generally be released not only on the PlayStation 2, but the Xbox and GameCube as well. And unsurprisingly, a sequel to Crash Team Racing was created shortly after, Crash Nitro Kart. Despite being developed by a completely different studio, now in the hands of Vicarious Visions, this game truly feels like it was made to just be CTR2, which makes sense as that was the working title during development. It has the same driving and item mechanics, and the art style really captures the spirit of CTR, but taken to the next level thanks to the improved hardware of this generation. But they also weren't afraid to take some risks and come up with some new ideas. Multiplier crates can now be found on a track, which gives you 3 of an item at once. But the downside is they're out of the way or on hard to navigate sections of the track, so there's a decent level of risk versus reward there. We also have exclamation mark crates, which when activated will cause something to happen on the track. Sometimes it's a shortcut, sometimes it's a big hazard that gets in your way. Also, I didn't know it until I played this game recently, but Crash Nitro Kart did the anti-gravity thing a decade before Mario Kart 8, even down to the tires rotating to keep you afloat. Now, of course, it's far more inelegant, but I was amazed to find this out nonetheless. The game's adventure mode is very strong as well, being about the same as CTR. A different big evil alien is here, kidnapping the gang and forcing them to race for his people's entertainment. This time you get to play on teams, with 3 characters on each team, allowing you to swap between them during the game. This is a nice addition, as in CTR, the character you picked for adventure mode was the character you were stuck with for the entire playthrough. The team aspect also plays a role in the new team race mode, which is what the adventure mode largely consists of. When you and a teammate are nearby, a meter will begin to charge. When full, you can activate Team Frenzy, which grants both of you the ability to use unlimited items for a short while, and this is absolutely busted. Just smashing the circle button and using any and all items you can is such a fun feeling, even if it is completely broken. Sadly, Nitro Kart just doesn't beat the original. The handling and control of your kart in this game just isn't as good as in CTR. It doesn't feel as responsive, you find yourself bonking into walls way more often, and at one point in the hub world, you can just get stuck on an anti-gravity slope. It's absolutely a solid attempt at making a sequel, especially given that it was a completely different team at the helm, and it's still a good time, but this is just a rare case where the first one was simply that good. It's hard to compete. But what if I want to drive a car while I'm driving a car? Crash Nitro Kart was in that era where developers would make 9 different games for 9 different platforms and call them all the same thing. So we got Crash Nitro Kart for the Game Boy Advance. Unsurprisingly, this is pretty different from the console version, but the difference is about as good as Mario Kart 64 versus Super Circuit. Hardware limitations aside, it's a surprisingly good conversion into a 2D screen the size of a thimble. Even the courses are all as close as possible to the console version. Naturally, it's all done in the pseudo 3D that was common with the Game Boy Advance, but for the most part, the track layouts end up being close, if not identical, to their Big Boy counterparts. The drift and boost mechanic was also implemented, but I kinda hate it here. The GBA's limited buttons made them move around some of the functions. The item button is on the left trigger, which feels more natural than the PS2 circle button, but that means we can't use that for the drift boost. Instead, we have to start the drift, lift our finger off the A button, then press it again. And this just doesn't feel intuitive at all. But on the plus side, I ended up not really using the drifting and boosting, and I still performed just fine in most of the races. But most impressive, they managed to squeeze the adventure mode, hub worlds and all, into this version, which is pretty shocking for the damn Game Boy Advance. Like, they had no real need to do this. The adventure mode could have easily been streamlined to just basic menus and races, but they went for the true experience, and it kinda worked. The final boss can fuck right off though. He literally cheats, rubber banding ahead of you constantly. I had the lead in the final stretch of the race once, just for him to speed ahead and beat me by literally 0.3 seconds. And then the next race he did it again and beat me by 0.2. Surprisingly, this game also has content that doesn't exist in the console version, namely the big bad bosses. None of the bosses can be unlocked as normal racers on the console game, but here on GBA, they are all playable simply by defeating them in the adventure mode. Oh, and Spyro is here too. Crash and Spyro were often associated together, both being icons of the PlayStation 1, and at this point, they were both owned by the same company, making this Game Boy Advance conversion of a racing game technically the first time Spyro and Crash ever appeared side by side. But now let's say I want to play this game on a handheld that I can also immediately use to report somebody to the authorities. The Nokia N-Gage was a weird little experiment. The phone company Nokia wanted to break into the handheld gaming market by offering a device that could still function as a cell phone. It did not go well. Both the original model and the N-Gage QD failed to make a dent in any meaningful way, which is kind of funny because it was almost ahead of its time with how big mobile games became just a few short years later. But come on, would you want to play a game on this thing? Despite being a commercial failure, the N-Gage saw over 50 physical games released for the platform, one of which was a version of Crash Nitro Kart. And miraculously, this is a full version of the game, just like the Game Boy Advance version was, which is both impressive and horrible. They somehow managed to include the full adventure mode with the hub worlds and all of the characters and features into this dinky ass toy. The screen size on this thing is pitiful. It's like half of what the Game Boy Advance has, and that version already felt like it was too small. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be a problem by default if you developed around this limitation, but your character is always so close to the camera that the amount of track you can see at any given time is just not enough. Pair that with slippery controls and the actual track and background moving quite a bit, and it can actually be pretty dizzying trying to play this game. And even without the motion sickness, it's just so easy to lose track of where you are because of how aggressively everything moves around. Fortunately, they knew you were going to run into a bunch of stuff, so they compensated for that by making the CPUs stupid baby easy, that you can just catch up to them in no time. The tracks were also not designed specifically around the N-Gage, which is strange because they were all completely redone from scratch for the N-Gage version. While the layouts are all the same as the GBA games, the N-Gage tracks are all actually in 3D, including slopes and the airtime boost mechanic. And at that rate, if you're remaking the tracks anyway, why not make some tweaks to better fit this version of the game? And man, the controls on this thing are so bad. And okay, this isn't strictly a Crash problem. Pretty much every N-Gage game suffered because playing on a numpad like this just does not work. But it is also kind of a problem with the game. You have to hold 5 to accelerate, press 2 to drift, and press 4 to use an item. I feel like I'm one weird finger slip away from accidentally dialing the SWAT team.
Get your hands in the air! Drop your weapon! You're under arrest!
But one mildly neat thing that this version did is offer online play. Kinda. I mean, it's just a time trial leaderboard, but on a damn taco shell with T9 texting, even the bare minimum is impressive. And if you thought we were done with Crash Nitro Kart conversions, you were almost right. Not only did they make a version for this special cell phone, they made versions for all kinds of cell phones too. This is the kind of phone game that we were used to in the mid-2000s. Something popped out in an afternoon just to be able to say you had a mobile game, but really it's nothing all that interesting. It wasn't really designed to be played for extended periods. It was purely just something for your thumbs to do for minutes of gameplay at a time. We were really in the trenches. Everybody laugh at the old man. So now we get to move on to the next proper entry in the Crash Racing series. This is Crash Tag Team Racing, and I cannot wait to jump in and get my hands behind the wheel of a car once more. What the hell is this? Crash Tag Team Racing is such a freak of a game. It's like the developers didn't know what game they wanted to make. It's half kart racer, half platformer, half minigame collection. In the adventure mode, you explore the Motor World theme park, traveling from world to world collecting power crystals. You can sometimes find these in the platforming areas, or by playing minigames scattered throughout the world. But the main way is by completing these driving levels. Eventually, you get enough crystals to unlock the jump pad, grab the area's gem, unlock the next part of the park, and rinse and repeat until the game is finished. The platforming is kinda lame. Crash and the camera don't really control all that great, and anyway, I didn't buy a racing game to play a platformer. And the mini-games are pretty boring. They're almost all just different reskins of a shooting minigame, only having vaguely different goals. Oh, except for bowling, that one rules. But even the racing parts of the game suck. They completely abandoned the whole driving system from CTR and Nitro Kart. Instead of go-karts, you actually drive big giant cars, which on its face isn't that big of a deal. But the whole gimmick of this game is this clash mechanic. If you activate this ability and run into another vehicle, the two of you merge cars and become one racer. One person drives and one person shoots out of a giant turret on the back. And this is just not interesting gameplay. If you're in control of the turret, your sole job is to just point and shoot at the other cars until you're out of ammo. You're experiencing none of the driving, and worse yet, you don't really get to appreciate any of the track design or ambience or anything because you're just shooting. But if you're driving, you're basically just driving. You don't get to have fun with item play in any meaningful way because half of the other drivers are being hit by your teammate. So the moments where using an item would make any kind of difference is fairly rare. It's like you're experiencing only half of the game when you're engaging in its core mechanic, and that just sucks. I think the mechanic itself is interesting, and it probably works really well in multiplayer scenarios, but it just lasts way too long in the single player, and you kinda just end up going on autopilot. Apparently, this game was pretty rushed, which, yeah, you can tell. Like for instance, the ending. You get enough crystals, you get to the last area, the final cutscene plays, and there isn't a big final boss or a big race, you're just done. But on the plus side, Dolly Parton is technically canon to the Crash Bandicoot universe.
I knew I should have got a job at Dollywood instead.
And unsurprisingly, Crash Tag Team Racing not only had a console release, but a handheld release as well on the PSP. This is literally the console game. Okay, literally the console game. The PSP was famous for having handheld ports of console games, but it was also a coin toss whether you were going to get a totally different game that just had the same name, or a scaled-down version of the console game with some minor changes. And in this case, you pretty much got the same game. There was actually some exclusive content in both versions. Some exclusive cars and arenas, and each version actually has an exclusive mode. But if you connect the PS2 and the PSP to one another, you can unlock all of that content found in the opposite version. Being on a handheld really doesn't save this game from just being mediocre. Just because I can now play it portably doesn't mean the game is any more fun. I'm just having a miserable time on the bus. And apparently, a Nintendo DS version of Tag Team Racing was in development as well, and got pretty far along. But around the time they planned to release it, Mario Kart DS was scheduled to drop, and they figured they couldn't compete with that game, so they just canned the whole thing. Kinda crazy to just completely axe a near-finished project simply because there's other competition. But there were also members of the development team that said there were some internal issues with the various companies involved, so that actually kinda makes a lot more sense. Images of development assets were posted online in 2014, but no playable build of the game or any gameplay of the DS version has ever been seen. Wait, did you think we were done with cell phones? No, get ready, because they really wanted Crash to work on mobile. First, we've got a not port of not Crash Tag Team Racing that was released in 2005, a game simply called Crash Racing, but it uses the art, characters, and elements all found in Tag Team Racing. And despite dropping the tag team part of the name, you can in fact perform clashes, which increases your speed and allows you to shoot projectiles. I just got nothing to say about this one. I would call this something for my thumbs to do too, but even that's a stretch. This one really feels like left and right simulator for the Nokia family of cell phones. Only thing I can do is hope that an emergency happens to take me away from this game. Oh, thank God. After a few years, they wanted to give it another go, but they took a really interesting approach. In the time since the previous game, phones were experiencing a revolution. The iPhone had come out, completely changing the standards for smartphones. Other companies were figuring out what to do. Some were going the iPhone route, while others were doing their best to improve their more traditional cell phones. Regardless, all cell phones were becoming so much better. And with Apple releasing their App Store, where you can download apps and games, a whole new market was opening up. Because of these two factions of phone types, Vivendi Games didn't want to leave any market untouched. So they contracted two different studios to create a new Crash racing game for each platform. On more traditional phones, they released Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart, which then for some reason got a name change to Crash Nitro Kart 2. On iPhone and other higher tier phones, the title that released was instead Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D, and What is that?! Yeah, it's bad enough that they were using this awful redesign of Crash Bandicoot for this game, but they truly put like 19 seconds into modeling the characters. Like, this is supposed to be Ripper-Roo? The 2D game falls pretty much in line with the previous mobile kart racers, though I think it's probably the best of the bunch, with better hardware and kinda just giving more of a shit. The developers actually made a game that you enjoy playing. The 3D version is sort of like a watered-down version of the console games, with forced motion controls if you were on iPhone, because that was the cool thing to do in those days. It's kind of amazing that despite the incredible difference in art style, control, and even just straight-up gameplay, these two games are also pretty similar. The story's the same, the missions performed are exactly the same, but naturally there are many differences too. Both versions have a shared roster, but they each also get two exclusive characters. The items are also somewhat different. The 3D version has all the items you'd expect from a console Crash kart racer, while the 2D version has stuff that works a little better for this limited gameplay. There are tire spikes that pop the tires of anyone who bumps you, a remote control crash car that works like a blue shell, a black hole that spawns a Looney Tunes hole ahead on the track, and even a flying cart item. Both games also have crash letters scattered about. While collecting all of these in a race simply unlocks a new character in 3D, in 2D you instead activate
Monster Truck Mode,
souping up your car and giving you speed and invincibility so you can crush all other racers. As a pair, these two games are just so interesting. Releasing versions on both, making sure there was some unity across both, and above all, finally making a halfway decent kart racer for mobile. I mean, it could never beat the proper console games, but they truly gave it a decent try, especially for 2008. But could you imagine playing this on an actual console with an actual controller? The Zeebo was a game console created particularly for regions that didn't really have much of a gaming market. Where piracy and bootlegs ran rampant, such as China, Russia, and South America, Zeebo was supposed to be the answer. My hero. It was designed to bring mobile and older console games to these new markets in a cheap way. They aren't able to get fancy modern games in these regions, they get Zeebo. This console was a colossal failure, but before it could crash and burn, Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D was ported over to it. Wow. Taking a passable mobile game and putting it on a console without really doing any kind of touch-up to make it enjoyable in that new medium, this one's rough. The controls are just awful, and the gameplay, while fine for a mobile game, does not fly for a full console game. There are kids out there with their opinion of kart racers and Crash Bandicoot firmly established because of Crash Zebo Kart, and to them, I just want to say, I'm so sorry. The greatest sin is that the models are exactly as they look on the mobile versions. And when you aren't playing on this tiny phone screen actually moving it around side to side, but instead you're playing it on a static big TV, someone please put him out of his misery. And the mobile games don't stop there. A sequel to Nitro Kart 3D was released in 2010, Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 2. Not to be confused with Crash Nitro Kart 2, which was originally named Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart, which is different from Crash Nitro Kart. Why the hell did they do this? Once again, this game is pretty competent, essentially playing the same as Nitro Kart 3D, but with one huge plus. You can turn off motion controls and just control it with a little slider down in the corner. It's nice to have the option, but I think the whole accelerometer novelty wore off pretty quickly, so I'm glad that you can just control the game more directly. But the surprising thing with this game is the amount of stuff you can do. Grand Prix Cups, Time Trial, and Mission Mode are all back, but then there are several more modes that change up the goal of each race and really give you more variety. But perhaps most ambitious is that this game had online multiplayer, and not just half-assed time trial stuff that they had in the past. You could host and join online rooms and play across all of the modes that the game offered. It's really not all that surprising based on today's standards, but this was 2010. Our phones still had home buttons. This was impressive. Oh, and they went back to the classic designs, which look leagues better than that. Seriously, it's like the models got corrupted at the last second and they just shipped it anyway. This game was the final straw for the Crash series for a while. It might not have been the direct cause, Crash was certainly on a decline for a while, but it was the final game to release before the series fell dormant. But behind the scenes, plans for a reboot were taking place following the merger of Vivendi with Activision to create Activision Blizzard. A traditional Crash game called Crash Landed was in the works, and alongside it, a proper new Crash racing game, simply titled Crash Team Racing. We've got some footage that survived today, but sadly, Activision trashed these projects and laid off both teams working on these games. But the good news is you can sort of play this game today. The work done on Crash Team Racing was reworked into a different kart racer. DreamWorks Superstar Karts brings together several of DreamWorks' iconic movie properties into a big kart racer. And honestly, they don't have a horrible lineup. Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, Madagascar, Monsters vs. Aliens, these are all fantastic movies that have become huge brands, so it's no surprise that they went for this. But man, this game is dog shit. And if it's reflective of what the Crash reboot was going to be, then thank God. This game is so clunky and jarring. One second I'm speeding along and I feel like I have great control. The next I slow to a crawl and I'm bumping into invisible walls. They also did this thing with the drifting where rather than using it to cut tight corners and earn a boost along the way, you swing way out and essentially build up energy, then release and go blasting forward. This takes all the joy out of drifting, especially when it seems like you have to hit a drift to be able to make some of these turns successfully. But the drift isn't good enough to even make that turn. Every character does get a fun super move though, like Shrek with his roar or Donkey with his child labor. It wouldn't be until 2017 that after a 6-year hiatus, Crash would return with the Crash and Sane trilogy, a gorgeous remake of the first 3 Crash games. This collection performed insanely well, inspiring not only a similar Spyro remake collection, but also a complete remake of CTR, Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled. This remake effectively brings the game into the modern age. Upgraded visuals, tweaked controls, and overall just an insane level of polish. Side-by-side comparisons of the original and remake are insane to look at. Like it's a real testament to how much graphics have evolved in just a few short decades. The game also plays just like the original. Some physics things have changed, so of course it's not an exact copy. There was a lot of tweaking that happened, but genuinely it just feels so good to play this game. Not only do all of the tracks from the original return, but so does Adventure Mode, with some really nice quality of life enhancements. You can play in Classic Mode, exactly how the original played, or Nitro-Fueled, which offers different difficulty levels and allows you to change your character and kart at any time, which is fantastic. The original is obviously great, but it does get a little stale playing as your one single character for the entire game. But Nitro-Fueled doesn't just stop at being a CTR remake. This game is chock full of content from both Crash Nitro Kart and Tag Team Racing. Racers, tracks, and karts all from the later games are included. It evolved into this bizarre but really wonderful fusion of all the different games. And this game also got insane levels of post-launch support as well. Not only did we get all of this returning content from the previous games, but all new stuff was constantly being added in. Characters had skins in the base game, but would regularly receive new skins that were purchasable using Wumpa coins in the rotating item shop. They also held periodic Grand Prix events, which all followed a general theme and each introduced a brand new track. New racers, karts, skins, all completely for free. These packs range from girly pops to returning bad guys, and of course, Spyro the Dragon. They even had some PlayStation exclusive stuff, like retro skins and a whole PlayStation themed track. The game stopped receiving updates in 2020, but to this day, you can earn all of the content the game has to offer. It may be a little annoying since you're confined to whatever the item shop offers on any given day, but it's pretty remarkable that you could buy this game for the first time in 2025 and still be able to enjoy all of the game's content with a little perseverance or money. Nitro-Fueled was really the perfect remake. The developers knew what people loved about the first one, and they knew that while the others fell a little flat, there were also good elements there that they could incorporate as well. What started out as a remake of the first game sort of evolved into a celebration of Crash's kart racing history, minus the N-Gage stuff. Despite all of the lows, I still can't help but look at Crash racing games with fondness. They just did so well on their first attempt that almost all of the sequels were doomed from the start because they couldn't match the quality of Crash Team Racing. At least until they just made that game all over again. But still, almost every Crash racing game has some fun to be had. Even if it's not the best in the series, each one, at least a little bit, is worth checking out. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got a debt to society to pay back. I shouldn't have played the N-Gage. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. A huge thank you to all of my patrons for directly supporting this content. Head on over to patreon.com/Aaronitmar for early access and behind the scenes content.